One of the best-selling cars in the world was actually Hitler's project. Do you know the world's second best-selling car brand today? Volkswagen. Chances are, at least one Volkswagen is parked somewhere in your neighborhood. But who owns Volkswagen? When and how was it founded? And how did it become such a successful brand? Let's talk about it today. Our story goes back to 1930s Germany. In 1933, Adolf Hitler had come to power, and he had some big goals. One of them was a project to provide a car for every family. Due to the economic difficulties of the time and the extremely high cost of foreign cars, people could not afford a car. It had become a luxury. Hitler saw this as an opportunity and asked, "Why don't we produce our own car?" This would not only revive the economy, but also give people a chance to buy an affordable car, and most importantly, it could be used as political propaganda. He immediately gathered a commission and held discussions. A company called Volkswagen, which means the people's car in German, was established. And so, the Volkswagen brand we know today was originally founded under Hitler's orders. Hitler wanted to start working on this immediately. To this end, he assigned engineer Ferdinand Porsche, who would later establish his own brand. Hitler asked Porsche to design a car that was cheap, durable, fuel-efficient, could seat 4 people, and would appeal to everyone. However, there was a problem. With the technology of that time, it was hardly possible to combine all these features in a single car. Still, the orders came from above, and the work began. The first ideas slowly started to take shape. Porsche, setting aside conventional design approaches, positioned the engine at the rear of the car. He designed the body to be as light as possible while remaining strong. The materials used were simple, but long-lasting. However, this was still not enough. The engine was overheating, and the car's handling was still not at the desired level. At this point, Porsche and his team made an important decision. They would reduce the engine size and use an air-cooled system. This way, the number of parts would decrease, and the risk of failure would be lower. Indeed, this approach became one of the main reasons the car would become legendary: simplicity. Finally, the first prototypes were produced and the tests were successfully completed. Everything was almost ready. The world-famous Beetle models had been born, waiting for the day they would meet their users. But, as you might have guessed, dark days were approaching. It was 1939 and World War II broke out. Germany was preparing to fight the whole of Europe. For this reason, with an urgent decision, the factories set up for the Beetle were suddenly converted into military production facilities. From then on, military vehicles were produced instead of civilian cars. In fact, during this period, Porsche was once again assigned to tank production. He spent a long time working in this field for Germany. In the dark years of the war, after 6 years of great suffering and loss, Germany lost the war. As a result, the factory came under British control. However, the facility, which had been heavily bombed during the war, was almost completely destroyed, leaving behind only a ruin. Most people thought that this factory could never be restored. Therefore, no one wanted to take it over or bring it back to life. But one person thought differently: Ivan Hurst. This officer, serving on behalf of the British Army, believed that the factory could become operational again. He repaired the machines in the factory and made great efforts to restart production. In the end, he succeeded. About a year later, in 1946, the factory began producing the Beetle once again. However, at first, the vehicles produced were only intended for use in government institutions and military units in England. In 1949, the British returned the factory to the German Republic. The fate of the factory, now under the protection of West Germany, was actually clear. The Beetle was ready, production was ready, and the factories were ready. The most logical thing to do was to produce and sell the Beetle, and that is exactly what they did. In this way, the Beetle finally reached its customers. In 1949, exactly 46,000 units were sold. For that time, especially for a Germany that had lost the war. This was an astonishing number. This development gave both people and the economy a real breath of fresh air. People could now buy cars more easily, and the government was slowly recovering the economy. But, as was said from the beginning, this car was truly designed to appeal to everyone. And it really did. The Beetle quickly began to gain popularity worldwide. It started receiving orders from many countries, especially the United States. People were very satisfied with the Beetle. The car rarely broke down, consumed very little fuel, and was extremely durable. It wasn't fast, but it was reliable. By 1955, the 1 millionth Beetle was produced. By then, this car had become more than just an automobile. It had become a symbol of Germany's rebirth. Moreover, orders were not decreasing. On the contrary, they were increasing year by year. In 1959, more than 500,000 units were produced in a single year, and in 1965, more than 1 million. Volkswagen was originally designed as the people's car. However, Porsche did his job so well that this car had effectively become the car of humanity. The 1960s were the golden age of the Beetle. Total production exceeded 15 million, breaking the record of a legend like the Ford Model T. The Beetle had now become one of the most iconic cars in the world, but every good thing comes to an end. After the 1970s, Beetle sales began to decline. In 1974, production in Germany was gradually stopped. The market had changed. People who had achieved economic prosperity now wanted faster, more modern, and more comfortable vehicles. Volkswagen responded quickly to this change and launched its new model, the Golf. The Golf was faster, more modern, and more attractive. With the birth of this new star, the Beetle gradually began to step off the stage. In 2003, the last Beetle was produced in Mexico, bringing production to a complete end. With a total of 21.5 million units produced, the Volkswagen Beetle secured its place in automotive history in golden letters. Today, they are classics. People see them and say, "What a cute car," and move on. But most do not know the story behind that bodywork. It was originally commissioned by Hitler, but he died before ever being able to use this car. Afterwards, thanks to the belief of a British officer, it was reborn and became one of the most successful car stories in the world. In the end, Volkswagen had achieved its goal. People could own their own cars, and Germany had overcome its economic difficulties. And the thing that caused all this was a small car that looked like a turtle. Because sometimes a single idea, even if you don't notice it, can change the world and history at its very root.